I stood at the edge of the visitor center deck, watching as the group of 6 hikers finished organizing their gear. The late afternoon sun warmed my back, but I felt the familiar chill that always came with this part of my job. 3 days in the backcountry, 6 hikers. Statistics suggested not all of them would make it out. "If I could have your attention," I called out, my voice carrying the weight of authority earned through years of service. "I'm David Harrison, Senior Park Ranger. Before you head out, I need to go through the mandatory safety briefing." They gathered around me with varying levels of interest. I'd seen their types countless times before. The eager first-timers, the overconfident experienced hikers who thought they knew better than the rules. The pattern never changed, only the faces. "I assume you've all been briefed on standard wilderness precautions. Bear safety, weather awareness, leave no trace principles." I paused, making eye contact with each hiker. "What I'm about to tell you goes beyond those basics. These are 6 rules specific to this section of the Smoky Mountains. Following them isn't optional. It's required for your survival." A tall man with expensive hiking gear snorted quietly. Robert Mitchell, according to my check-in sheet. Mid-30s, listed himself as an experienced backpacker. The dangerous kind of hiker, the one who thought he knew better. Rule number 1, stay on marked trails at all times. Not just for environmental protection. The marked paths are maintained with certain protections. Step off them, especially at night, and you're in territory we can't guarantee your safety in. "What kind of protections?" asked a woman with dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. My sheet identified her as Emily Garcia. She had a small notebook out and was actually taking notes. At least one of them was taking this seriously. Salt lines embedded in the trail boundaries, iron filings mixed in with the gravel. Old methods, but effective. I kept my tone matter of fact. No need to sensationalize what was already difficult to believe. Rule number 2, if you hear whistling in the woods, especially melodic whistling that seems to be drawing closer, run immediately in the opposite direction. Don't investigate. Don't try to record it, just run. "What, like a whistling bird or something?" asked a young man with a camera hanging around his neck. Tyler Wilson. He seemed more intrigued than concerned. "Not a bird," I said flatly. Rule number 3. If you encounter a man playing an acoustic guitar sitting on a log or rock, do not approach him. Do not listen to his music. Walk away immediately and report the sighting to me. "These sound like campfire stories," Robert interrupted, crossing his arms. "Is this some kind of tourist gimmick? Spook the city folks with ghost stories?" I looked at him directly. "Mr. Mitchell, I've lost 17 hikers in my 12 years patrolling these mountains. 6 of them went missing after ignoring rule number 3. We only found partial remains for 2 of them." That silenced him momentarily, though his expression remained skeptical. Rule number 4. If you see unusual lights between the trees, particularly blue or green lights that move in patterns, do not follow them regardless of how beautiful or compelling they seem. They're not fellow hikers, they're not natural phenomena, and they will lead you to your death. "Will-o'-the-wisps," whispered a quieter woman I identified as Sarah Brooks. "My grandmother used to talk about those." I nodded. Your grandmother was wise. Rule number 5. If you encounter a park ranger, verify their identity. Ask to see their badge number and compare it to the one I'm giving you now. I handed Emily a card with my badge information. "Real rangers patrol in scheduled rotations. We don't wander randomly through the backcountry." "Why would we need to verify rangers?" asked an athletic woman, Jessica Sanders, according to my sheet. "Because sometimes things in these mountains wear familiar faces to lure hikers," I answered. Which brings me to Rule 6. If you hear or see a child alone in the woods, do not attempt to help them. Report it to me immediately via radio, but do not approach, speak to, or attempt to assist any child you encounter away from designated camping areas. The final man in the group, Kevin Adams, who had been quiet until now, frowned. "You expect us to ignore a lost child? That seems wrong." "There are no children registered for backcountry camping this week," I explained. "Any child you encounter out there is not what they appear to be. Following this rule has saved lives." Emily raised her hand like she was in a classroom. "These rules all sound like they're about supernatural things. Do you actually believe in that?" I considered my answer carefully. Too much truth and I'd lose them completely. Too little, and they might not take the danger seriously. What I believe doesn't matter. What matters is that these rules have proven effective at keeping hikers safe in this part of the park. You can think of them as precautions against natural phenomena that we don't fully understand yet, if that helps. But follow them regardless of what you believe they're protecting you from. Robert laughed outright. "This is ridiculous. You're telling us to be afraid of whistling, guitar players, lights, and lost kids? This has to be some folklore meant to scare tourists for fun." "Think what you want," I said, my patience wearing thin after years of similar reactions. "But stay on the trails, follow the rules, and you'll all make it back alive." I distributed emergency radios to the group, demonstrating how to use the channel that connected directly to my handset. "Check in each night at 7. I'll be patrolling the same routes, keeping a safe distance unless you need assistance." As they shouldered their packs and made final adjustments to their gear, I noticed Emily glancing back at me nervously. Her eyes held a question. Was I serious, or was this all elaborate theater? Tyler seemed almost eager to encounter something strange, testing his camera settings as if hoping to document the supernatural. Jessica and Kevin exchanged uncertain looks, while Sarah methodically checked her map, seemingly taking my warnings to heart despite their strangeness. Robert led the way toward the trailhead, his posture radiating confidence bordering on arrogance. "Come on, folks. The only thing we need to worry about out there is bears and bad weather. The rest is just local color to make our trip more exciting." I watched them disappear into the tree line, the forest quickly swallowing their colorful backpacks and excited chatter. Following protocol, I'd give them 30 minutes head start before beginning my patrol. Just enough time to get my own gear ready and prepare mentally for what might be coming. Too many of them had looked at me with disbelief. Experience told me that at least one would break the rules, likely Robert, possibly taking others with him. I checked my specialized equipment one last time. Iron filings, salt packets, silver-edged knife, emergency flares designed to emit specific light frequencies. The sun continued its descent toward the horizon. In 30 minutes, I'd begin following their trail, watching from a distance, hoping I wouldn't need to use any of the tools I carried. But hope rarely counted for much in these mountains, where ancient things still walked and hunted under the cover of disbelief. I gave the hikers their 30-minute head start, then shouldered my own pack and began walking the same trail. The gear felt heavy against my back, but it was a familiar weight, one I'd carried hundreds of times before. Each item represented a lesson learned, often paid for in blood. Iron filings from the incident 3 years ago, silver-edged blade after what happened to that family last summer, protective measures evolving with each new encounter, each lost hiker. The afternoon sun filtered through the canopy as I maintained a steady pace. I didn't need to rush. Experience told me exactly where the first designated camping area was located and how long it would take a group of mixed hiking abilities to reach it. I kept far enough back to avoid hovering over them, but close enough to intervene if necessary. About 45 minutes in, I caught sight of their colorful backpacks moving steadily along the main trail. They'd made good progress. Emily was near the front, consulting her map regularly. Kevin and Sarah walked close together, maintaining a sensible pace. Robert led the way with confident strides, occasionally gesturing broadly as if lecturing the others about something. Tyler kept stopping to photograph interesting trees or rock formations, while Jessica waited patiently for him each time. I tracked them from ridgelines and parallel paths when possible, using my knowledge of the terrain to keep them in view without making my presence known. No need to make them feel watched. The good ones would follow the rules without supervision, and the stubborn ones wouldn't change their behavior just because I was visible. As sunset approached, the group reached the first designated camping area, a flat clearing about 20 yards off the main trail, but still within the protected boundaries marked by embedded salt lines and iron filings. Through my binoculars, I observed them dropping their packs and beginning to discuss campsite arrangements. That's when the trouble started. Robert's voice carried clearly through the evening air. "This spot is garbage. Look at that view over there." He pointed toward a ridge about 50 yards from the trail. "Why camp here when we could wake up to that sunrise?" Emily shook her head. The ranger was clear about staying on marked trails. This camping spot is designated for a reason. "Oh, come on," Robert scoffed. "Those rules are just liability protection. The Park Service doesn't want to get sued if someone falls off a cliff. I've camped all over this country. Nothing bad has ever happened to me off trail." Emily stood her ground. "He specifically mentioned protections on the trails, salt lines and iron filings." "Superstitious nonsense," Robert said, waving his hand dismissively. "You really believe that stuff? Next you'll be carrying garlic to ward off vampires." Their argument continued as the others looked on uncomfortably. I watched as the group began to split. Tyler seemed torn, looking from Emily to Robert. "I mean, the view does look amazing for sunrise photos," he said, glancing toward the ridge. Jessica nodded. "And the ground looks flatter over there. Less roots to sleep on." Sarah checked her map. "The designated area is marked for a reason. I'm staying here." "Me too," Kevin added quietly. I watched as Robert shrugged, then turned to Tyler and Jessica. "Your loss. Come on, we'll set up over there and have the best campsite photos to show everyone back home." The three of them gathered their gear and headed toward the ridge while Emily, Sarah, and Kevin began setting up in the proper camping area. I knew I needed to intervene. This was exactly how people got hurt, or worse. I circled around to approach from the trail, rather than suddenly appearing from the forest. Emily spotted me first as I walked into the designated camping area. "Mr. Harrison," she said, looking relieved. "We tried to tell them to stay here, but—" "I heard," I said, setting down my pack. "You three did the right thing staying on the marked path." I turned toward the ridge where Robert's group was already hammering tent stakes into the ground. "I'll handle this." I made my way quickly to their improvised campsite. The sun hung low on the horizon now, painting everything in deep orange. We had maybe 30 minutes of daylight left. Not much time to correct this situation. "You need to break this down and move back to the designated area," I said without preamble. Robert looked up from his half-assembled tent. "Oh, come on. We have permits for backcountry camping anywhere within park boundaries." "Not anywhere," I corrected him. "Only in designated backcountry camping zones. This isn't one of them." "This is ridiculous," Robert said, continuing to secure his tent. "We are 50 yards from your precious trail. What's going to happen? The bogeyman going to get us?" "Something like that," I said flatly. Tyler laughed nervously, looking between Robert and me. Jessica had stopped unpacking her sleeping bag, seeming unsure. "Look," I said, trying a different approach. "I know it seems arbitrary, but these rules exist because of liability." Robert interrupted. "The Park Service covering their ass. I get it." "No, you don't," I said, my patience wearing thin. "Those rules exist because 17 people have died on my watch, and I'm trying to make sure you don't become numbers 18, 19, and 20. That silenced him momentarily, but his stubborn expression remained. "The sun's almost down," I pressed. "You really want to be off the protected path after dark?" "Protected from what?" Robert challenged. "Bears. We've got bear spray. Wolves. They don't attack humans. What exactly are you protecting us from with your magic salt lines?" Before I could answer, the light faded significantly as the sun dipped below the mountain ridge. and then we heard it. A low, melodic whistling drifting through the trees from somewhere behind Robert's unauthorized campsite. My blood went cold. I recognized that sound immediately. "Everyone back to the trail now," I ordered, my voice deadly serious. "Leave your gear, move." Emily, Sarah, and Kevin were already on their feet in the designated area, looking around nervously. "What is that?" Jessica asked, her eyes wide. "Rule number 2, I reminded them. "Run in the opposite direction, now." The whistling grew slightly louder, the melody complex and somehow wrong, notes that shouldn't flow together but did. I'd heard it before. Those who listened too long never returned. Emily, Sarah, and Kevin immediately began moving toward the main trail. Jessica grabbed her pack, but I shook my head. "Leave everything. Just go." Tyler stood frozen, his head tilted slightly as if trying to hear the melody better. His eyes had a glazed look that I recognized from previous incidents. The whistling had him. "Tyler!" I snapped, but he didn't respond. Jessica grabbed his arm. "Tyler, come on." When he didn't move, she physically dragged him away from the sound. "Tyler, snap out of it." Robert remained by his tent, though I could see uncertainty creeping into his expression. "This is some kind of park ranger prank, right? You guys do this to scare the tourists?" The whistling changed tone, becoming more complex, more enticing. It seemed to be coming closer. "Robert," I said firmly, "look at Tyler. Does he look like he's reacting to a prank?" Tyler was still being pulled along by Jessica, his movements mechanical, his eyes unfocused as he tried to turn back toward the sound. Finally, something in Robert's confidence cracked. He abandoned his tent and began backing toward us. The whistling suddenly stopped. Complete silence fell over the forest. No birds, no insects, not even the sound of wind in the leaves. An unnatural quiet that pressed against our ears like physical pressure. Even Robert looked visibly uncomfortable now. "What the hell?" "Back to the trail," I said quietly. "Now, all of you." No one argued this time. We retreated together toward the designated camping area where Emily, Sarah, and Kevin waited anxiously. The silence followed us, an absence of sound that felt more threatening than any noise could have been. We reached the others, crossing back over the protective boundary of the marked trail. Only then did normal forest sounds gradually return, the distant call of a night bird, the rustle of leaves in the light breeze. "What was that?" Emily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "That," I said, looking back toward the abandoned campsite, "was why we stay on the marked trails after dark." 20 minutes later, we were all huddled together on the main trail. The normal sounds of the forest had returned, but the tension in our group remained thick enough to cut with a knife. I noticed Robert glancing repeatedly over his shoulder toward the abandoned campsite. His earlier cockiness substantially diminished. "What was that?" Emily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "That whistling, was it human?" "No," I said simply. "It wasn't human. That's what rule number 2 is about." Robert cleared his throat, still trying to maintain his skeptical facade. "Look, I admit that was weird, but there are plenty of natural explanations. Some kind of bird call, maybe. Or the wind through rock formations." Jessica, who had been examining the trees at the edge of our protected area, called out, "Then what made these?" We all moved closer to where she stood. She pointed at a series of deep gouges in the trunk of a large oak tree. They were fresh, the exposed wood still oozing sap. 4 parallel lines, each about an inch deep and 6 inches long. They started about 9 feet up the trunk. "Bears scratch trees," Robert offered weakly. "Bears can't reach 9 feet high," I countered, "and bear claws don't leave marks this deep or clean." Kevin ran his fingers along a nearby pine tree, revealing similar marks. "These are on multiple trees, all facing the same direction." toward where you three were setting up camp," Sarah added quietly. Robert swallowed hard, his eyes fixed on the marks. The reality of the situation was finally sinking in. "We need to move," I said, checking my watch. "There's a designated emergency shelter about 3 miles up the trail. We can reach it before midnight if we maintain a steady pace." "What about our gear?" Jessica asked. "We'll retrieve it tomorrow in daylight," I told her. "Right now, our priority is getting to secure shelter before these entities become more active." No one argued. Even Robert nodded in agreement, his gaze still locked on those unnatural scratches. I took point, with Emily close behind me. Kevin and Sarah stayed in the middle, while Jessica and Robert brought up the rear, half dragging Tyler between them. He seemed dazed, his eyes unfocused. We hiked in silence for about 45 minutes. The moon had risen, providing just enough light to navigate the trail safely. I kept my flashlight off unless absolutely necessary. No need to advertise our presence more than we already were. "I hear music," Tyler said suddenly, stopping in his tracks, his head tilted to one side, listening. "Guitar music, it's beautiful." I felt my stomach drop. "Where?" I demanded. Tyler raised his hand, pointing off to our right. "Over there. Can't you hear it?" I followed his gaze and saw exactly what I'd been dreading. A figure sitting on a fallen log about 100 yards away through the trees. Even in the dim moonlight, I could make out the acoustic guitar in his hands and the too wide smile on his face. Rule number 3. The figure saw us noticing him and raised a hand in greeting. "Hello there, travelers," he called, his voice carrying unnaturally well through the forest. "Care for some music around your campfire? I know all the old songs." His fingers began picking out a melody, one that seemed to bypass my ears and go straight to my brain. I recognized the danger immediately. "Everyone move," I ordered, pushing the group in the opposite direction. "Now, don't look back. Don't listen." I physically turned Emily away from the guitarist and nudged her forward. The others followed my lead, though Tyler seemed reluctant, his head still cocked toward the music. "Why can't we just say no thank you?" Sarah asked as we quickened our pace. "Seems rude to ignore him." "Because he's not asking permission," I explained, keeping my voice low. "His music is designed to trap you in a hypnotic state. You'd sit and listen until you died of starvation or exposure. That's how I lost those 6 hikers I mentioned." Kevin glanced back over his shoulder, then quickly faced forward again. "He's following us," he reported tensely, walking slowly, still playing that guitar. "Double time," I ordered. "We need to reach higher ground and put some distance between us." We picked up the pace, moving as quickly as we safely could in the moonlight. The trail began to incline, winding up toward a ridge that would give us better visibility and potentially more protection. I could still hear faint notes of the guitar music floating behind us, each note seeming to curl like a finger beckoning us back. "Look," Emily said suddenly, pointing to our left. "What are those lights?" Through the trees, blue pinpoints of light danced between the trunks. They pulsed rhythmically, growing brighter, then dimming in a pattern that almost seemed like breathing. They moved in formations too organized to be random, circles and figure eights, hypnotic in their precision. "Rule number 4, I said grimly. "Will-o'-the-wisps. Don't look at them." But Tyler had already stopped walking. His face was bathed in the blue glow as he stared, transfixed, at the lights. "They're so beautiful," he murmured. "They want to show me something important." Before I could reach him, Tyler stepped off the trail and began walking toward the lights. "Tyler, stop!" I shouted. "Get back on the trail!" He either couldn't hear me or wouldn't listen. His movements became more determined, picking up speed as he moved toward the blue glow. "Tyler!" Jessica screamed, lunging after him. I grabbed her arm. "Don't follow him off the trail!" Robert, showing unexpected initiative, ran along the trail to a point ahead of Tyler's trajectory, then reached out and managed to catch him by the back of his jacket. Tyler struggled immediately, fighting to break free. "Let me go!" he yelled, his voice desperate. "They're calling me. They need me!" Jessica rushed to help Robert, and together they physically restrained Tyler, who fought against them with surprising strength. His eyes never left the lights, which seemed to pulse more intensely, as if in response to his attention. "Hold him!" I ordered, quickly digging through my pack for something that might help. I pulled out a small pouch of iron filings and moved to where they were struggling with Tyler. "Keep his eyes covered," I told Jessica, who immediately placed her hand over Tyler's eyes. He thrashed even harder, making incoherent noises of distress. I spread a line of iron filings across the trail in front of us, then took a pinch and rubbed it across Tyler's forehead while he struggled. An old method, but sometimes effective. The lights behind us flared brightly, then retreated deeper into the forest, as if repelled by the iron. Gradually, Tyler's struggling subsided. When Jessica cautiously removed her hand from his eyes, he looked confused and exhausted. "What happened?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "Why are you all holding me?" "You don't remember trying to go to the lights?" Emily asked. Tyler shook his head slowly. "Lights? What lights?" "I just remember feeling like I needed to go somewhere. Something important was waiting for me." "We need to keep moving," I urged, helping steady Tyler as Robert and Jessica released him. "Those entities rarely hunt alone. Where there's one, there are often others nearby." "Entities?" Robert asked, his skepticism finally completely shattered. "What exactly are these things?" "Later," I said, already moving up the trail. "Right now, we need to reach that shelter before anything else finds us." The guitar music had stopped, but that didn't comfort me. In my experience, silence from these creatures meant they were regrouping, planning. The blue lights had retreated but not disappeared. I could still see faint pulses deep among the trees, keeping pace with us as we climbed. "The guitar man," Kevin said quietly, catching up to me. "Is he gone?" I swept my flashlight quickly behind us, revealing only empty trail. "For now. But he knows where we're headed. They all do." "How do you know?" Emily asked. "Because they're not random predators," I explained as we continued uphill. "They're intelligent. They communicate with each other. They strategize." "Like what, a supernatural hunting party?" Robert asked, his voice teetering between disbelief and fear. "Something like that," I confirmed grimly. "And right now, we're the prey." 2 hours later, we crested the final ridge. The secured ranger station sat nestled among the pines about 100 yards ahead, its dark outline barely visible against the night sky. My shoulders relaxed slightly at the sight of it. The station meant safety, reinforced walls, emergency supplies, and a radio to call for backup. "Is that it?" Emily asked, her voice raw from exertion. "That's it," I confirmed. "Emergency Station 7. We should be safe there until morning." Tyler still seemed disoriented, but at least he was moving under his own power now, with Jessica keeping a watchful eye on him. Robert had grown unusually quiet after our encounter with the guitar man, all his earlier skepticism replaced by wary glances into the darkness. I'd seen it before. That particular silence that came when someone's worldview shattered and they struggled to rebuild it with new, terrifying information. We approached the station cautiously. Something felt wrong. The security lights that should have activated on our approach remained dark. I raised my hand, signaling the group to stop. "Wait here," I instructed. "Let me check it out first." Before I could move forward, the door to the station swung open. Light spilled out from inside, and a figure stepped onto the small wooden porch. My blood froze. The man wore a park ranger uniform identical to mine. Same badge, same hat, same build, same face. "Hello there," he called, his voice, my voice, echoing in the clearing. "I'm Ranger David Harrison. Looks like you folks are having quite the emergency situation." I immediately pushed Emily behind me and drew my flashlight, aiming the beam directly at the imposter's face. "Everyone stay back," I ordered, my voice low and urgent. "That's not a ranger." The thing that wore my face smiled at me, the expression stretching a little too wide. "What are you talking about?" it asked, stepping forward with perfect mimicry of my walk. "I'm stationed here tonight." It turned to the hikers. "I'm afraid your guide might be suffering from exhaustion. It happens sometimes out here. The isolation, the stress. Ranger Harrison has been showing signs of paranoid delusions for weeks now." Emily pressed closer to my side. "That's not right," she whispered. "How could it know your name?" "Rule 5, I reminded them all. "Never trust a ranger you encounter randomly in the backcountry. Always verify their badge." Sarah pulled out the card I'd given her earlier. "What's your badge number?" she called to the figure. The imposter's smile widened further. 74983. My actual badge number. I felt sick. "It's not right," I said firmly. "This station isn't scheduled for staffing tonight." "Plans change," the false ranger replied smoothly. "After reports of hikers going off trail, management sent me out here as a precaution." It gestured toward the open door. "Now why don't you all come inside? I've got hot food, medical supplies, and a working radio to call for rescue services." I could feel the group's hesitation. The promise of warmth, food, and safety after what we'd been through was powerfully tempting. Robert took a step forward. "Look, I don't know what's happening between you two, but I'm freezing and exhausted." "Robert, don't," I warned. He ignored me, addressing the imposter. "You said you have a radio? We need to report 2 missing hikers." "Of course," the thing wearing my face nodded sympathetically. "Come inside, and we'll make that call right away." Robert started walking toward the station. I couldn't let him enter. Whatever waited inside wasn't rescue or safety. In all my years patrolling these mountains, I'd never encountered this particular entity before, but its purpose was clear. The false ranger stood between our group and the only secure shelter for miles. I made a split-second decision and launched myself forward, tackling Robert to the ground before he could reach the steps of the station. "What the hell?" he shouted, struggling beneath me. "Look at its face," I hissed, pinning him down. "Look at it!" The imposter's expression had changed. As we all stared, its features began to shift, the familiar contours of my own face melting away. Its eyes darkened, not just the irises, but the entire eye turning black and reflective like polished obsidian. Its mouth stretched impossibly wide, splitting the lower portion of its face. "Sweet Jesus," Kevin whispered behind us. The thing abandoned its human pretense entirely, its body contorting in ways no human skeleton would allow. It retreated backward into the darkness of the station, moving with a strange, jerking gait. "Don't follow it," I ordered, helping Robert to his feet. He didn't resist now, his face pale with shock. "We need to leave. This place isn't safe anymore." "Compromised," I cut her off. "We keep moving. There's an old fire road about a mile east that leads back to the main park entrance." As we backed away from the station, a new sound came from the forest to our right. A child's voice, high and frightened. "Help me, please! Is anyone there? I'm lost!" The voice cracked with a sob that made my skin crawl. Rule 6. No children were registered in the backcountry this week. Jessica's head snapped toward the sound. "There's a kid out there," she said, already moving toward the voice. I grabbed her backpack, yanking her backward. "That's not a child!" "Let go!" She struggled against my grip. "Can't you hear it? It's scared." "Please help me," the voice called again, closer now. "I can't find my mommy." I could see the conflict on Jessica's face, her rational mind remembering my warnings warring with her instinct to help a child in distress. "We need to go," Emily urged, taking Jessica's arm. "But..." Jessica looked toward the trees, her expression torn. A small figure emerged from the darkness. From a distance, it appeared to be a child of about 8 or 9 years old, wearing what looked like pajamas. It kept its head down, shoulders shaking with quiet sobs. "See? It's just a little kid," Jessica said, pulling against my grip. "Wait," I warned, not releasing her. The child thing stopped at the edge of the clearing. Slowly it raised its head. Black eyes, identical to those of the false ranger, stared back at us. Its mouth opened, revealing rows of needle-sharp teeth that no human child possessed. Jessica screamed, stumbling backward into Emily. The creature lunged forward with impossible speed, heading straight for Jessica. I shoved both women behind me and reached for my flare gun. I'd loaded it earlier with a specialized flare designed to emit a specific light frequency, one that these entities found painful. I fired directly at the approaching creature. The flare erupted in a blinding white-blue light that illuminated the entire clearing. The child thing shrieked, a sound no human vocal cords could produce, and retreated back toward the tree line, arms raised to shield its sensitive eyes from the harsh light. "Run!" I shouted, already backing away while keeping the flare between us and the creature. "Toward the east trail. Now!" No one argued this time. We ran together in the direction I'd indicated, the flare's light fading behind us as we plunged back into the darkness of the forest. The harsh glow of my flare began to fade, casting long shadows across the forest floor. In the dimming light, a terrible realization hit me. We weren't dealing with isolated incidents anymore. The guitar melody that had stalked us earlier now came from 3 different directions at once, each playing the same haunting tune with perfect synchronization. Above us, that melodic whistling drifted through the tree canopy, no longer approaching from a single source but surrounding us completely. Through the gaps between trees, blue and green lights began to pulse in slow circles around our position. "What's happening?" Sarah asked, her voice barely audible. "They're working together," I said, scanning our surroundings for an escape route. I've never seen this before. In 12 years of patrolling these mountains, I'd encountered many entities, but they typically hunted alone, competing for prey rather than cooperating. This coordination meant something was directing them, likely the false ranger. That creature was different from the others, more intelligent, more dangerous. "We're trapped," Kevin said, pointing out the dancing lights that had now formed a complete circle around us. "Not yet," I said. "But we need to move. There's an old mining road about half a mile east. It cuts straight back to the park boundary." Robert looked around wildly, his earlier confidence completely gone. "Which way is east?" I pointed between 2 large oak trees where the forest seemed to thin slightly. "That way. But we need to stay together." I looked at each of their faces, trying to project more confidence than I felt. "Link arms. No matter what happens, don't break formation." They obeyed without question. Emily took my left arm while Jessica grabbed my right. Kevin linked with Emily, and Sarah stood between Kevin and Robert, who looked pale and shaky. "Keep your eyes on the person in front of you," I instructed. "Don't look at the lights. Don't listen to the music. Don't respond to any voices." We began moving as one unit, stepping carefully over roots and fallen branches. The whistling above us grew more frantic, as if irritated by our organized retreat. "Where's Tyler?" Jessica asked suddenly, looking around our group. My stomach dropped. In the chaos of linking arms, I hadn't noticed Tyler wasn't with us. I turned just in time to see him standing apart from our group, staring at the dancing lights with an expression of wonder. "Tyler!" Emily called out. "Come on!" But Tyler wasn't listening. His head tilted to one side like he was hearing something the rest of us couldn't. Without warning, he bolted toward the blue lights, moving with surprising speed. "Tyler, stop!" Jessica screamed, trying to break away from me. I tightened my grip on her arm. "Don't follow him." "We can't just leave him," Emily cried, her eyes wide with horror. Tyler had already reached the edge of the light circle. As we watched, he stepped into their midst, the blue glow washing over his face and body. "Tyler!" Jessica called again. I made the hardest decision of the night, one I'd had to make before with other hikers. We can't help him now. If we break formation, we all die. "But," Emily began. "There's no time," I cut her off. "Move, now." I pulled them forward, forcing the group to continue toward the mining road. Emily looked back repeatedly, tears streaming down her face. Jessica kept calling Tyler's name until her voice grew hoarse. The guitar music swelled around us as we pushed through the underbrush, the synchronized melodies shifting into something that sounded almost like laughter. The tree canopy began to thin, allowing moonlight to filter through. "There," I pointed ahead, "the mining road." A narrow dirt path cut through the forest, barely visible in the moonlight, but distinct enough from the surrounding wilderness. It hadn't been maintained in decades, but it would lead us back to civilization if we could follow it long enough. As we stepped onto the road, Robert suddenly dropped to his knees. "I can't," he gasped, his breathing shallow and rapid. "Can't go any further." Kevin knelt beside him. "He's in shock." I checked Robert's pulse. Too fast. His skin cold and clammy despite our exertion. Classic signs of physical exhaustion combined with extreme stress. He wouldn't make it on his own. "Sarah, Kevin, each of you take one side," I ordered. "We need to keep moving." They positioned themselves on either side of Robert, lifting him by his arms. He tried to help, but his legs barely supported his weight. "What about Tyler?" Emily asked, her voice breaking. I looked back the way we had come. The forest had gone eerily quiet. No guitar music, no whistling. Even the usual sounds of nocturnal wildlife had vanished. That's when I saw it. The false ranger walking calmly down the center of the mining road behind us, maintaining the same steady pace we were trying to achieve with Robert slowing us down. "Don't look back," I told the others. "Just keep moving." But Emily had already turned. She gasped when she saw the figure. "It's following us," she whispered. I know. My mind raced through our options, which were becoming increasingly limited. "It's not trying to catch us." "What do you mean?" Jessica asked. "It could move much faster if it wanted to," I explained, keeping my voice low. "It's maintaining our exact pace." Kevin glanced back briefly. "Why would it do that?" A sick feeling settled in my stomach as I realized the truth. "It's hurting us." "Hurting us where?" Sarah asked, still struggling under Robert's weight. "I don't know," I admitted. "But we don't have a choice. We need to continue toward the park boundary. It's our only chance." We pressed forward, the weight of Robert slowing our progress. The mining road sloped gently downward, which helped our movement but told me we were heading into a valley, a potential trap. After 20 minutes of tense silence, Jessica suddenly stopped walking. "Oh God," she whispered, pointing into the trees to our right. There, standing perfectly still among a cluster of dim blue lights, was Tyler. He stood about 30 yards away, completely motionless. Even from this distance, I could see his eyes had turned completely black, reflecting the blue glow like polished stone. "Tyler," Emily called out. She turned to me, grabbing my arm. "We have to help him, please." Jessica was already moving toward him. I caught her shoulder. "That's not Tyler anymore," I said quietly. "What do you mean?" she demanded. "He's right there." I shook my head. "Look at his eyes. The lights have claimed him completely." "No," Emily sobbed. "There must be something we can do." "I've seen this before," I told her, keeping my voice gentle but firm. "Once they take someone like this, there's no bringing them back." "You can't know that for sure," Jessica argued. "I do know," I said, memories of past lost hikers weighing heavily on me. "We need to keep moving, or the same thing will happen to all of us." Emily stared at Tyler's distant figure, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry," she whispered. We continued down the mining road, the false ranger still following at the same measured pace. Robert had gone nearly limp between Sarah and Kevin, mumbling incoherently. "How much further?" Sarah asked, clearly struggling with Robert's weight. "Another mile, maybe 2, I answered, trying to remember the old maps of this area. "Once we reach the park boundary, we'll find help." I didn't tell them what worried me most, that something waited for us ahead. The entities weren't just chasing us from behind, they were driving us forward toward something. But we had no choice except to continue. Behind us, I heard the guitar music begin again, closer this time. Looking back, I saw not just the false ranger following, but what appeared to be Tyler as well, walking beside it with that same blank expression and those pitch-black eyes. 3 hours before dawn, we finally reached the park boundary. The trees thinned out, revealing emergency vehicles with flashing red and blue lights, casting eerie shadows across the forest edge. I felt my shoulders drop slightly in relief. We'd made it. The entities rarely ventured this close to civilization, where ambient light and human activity disrupted their hunting patterns. Emily let out a small, choked sob beside me. "We're safe?" "Yes," I said, leading our battered group toward the waiting paramedics and police officers. "We're out of their territory now." Sarah and Kevin still supported Robert between them. His condition had worsened during our final push to safety, his skin pale and clammy, his responses limited to occasional mumbling. The paramedics rushed forward with a stretcher when they saw him. "What happened to him?" one asked, helping lower Robert onto the stretcher. "Severe dehydration and shock," I answered, falling easily into the familiar pattern of translating supernatural horrors into terms authorities would accept. "We had to abandon our gear and water supplies when we encountered aggressive wildlife." The paramedic nodded, already checking Robert's vital signs. "And the rest of you?" Jessica stood slightly apart from our group, her arms wrapped around herself as she stared back into the darkness of the forest we'd just escaped. I knew she was thinking about Tyler. The image of him standing motionless among those blue lights, eyes black and empty, would haunt her for years to come. It would haunt all of us. "We're okay," Emily said quietly, though the dark circles under her eyes and the way her hands trembled told a different story. "Just tired." 2 police officers approached, notebooks ready. "We need statements from everyone," the older one said. "Can you tell us what happened out there?" I took charge of the narrative, knowing from experience how these conversations would go. We encountered aggressive wildlife after setting up camp off the designated trail. The group panicked and abandoned their equipment. We got separated from 2 hikers during the evacuation. The younger officer wrote this down. "What kind of wildlife? Bear?" "Possibly," I said, not technically lying. It was dark. There were multiple threats. The important thing is we need a search party for the missing hikers. Emily opened her mouth as if to contradict my simplified version of events, but I caught her eye and gave a subtle shake of my head. She seemed to understand and closed her mouth. "We'll organize a search at first light," the older officer assured us. "For now, you all need medical attention." The next hour passed in a blur of forms, medical checks, and questions. I watched as the survivors each gave their statements. Kevin described strange animal calls instead of guitar music. Sarah mentioned unusual lights that she assumed were from other hikers' flashlights. Emily came closest to the truth, describing the false ranger, but even she framed it as someone impersonating a park official. The authorities nodded and took notes, mentally translating these accounts into something that fit their understanding of the world. Bears, exposure, hallucinations caused by fear and exhaustion. I'd seen it countless times before. The human mind works hard to reject what it can't categorize. When it was my turn to file an official report, I used the standard codes developed over decades by rangers who knew the truth about these mountains. Environmental hazards instead of supernatural entities. Wildlife management. instead of containing otherworldly threats. Temporary trail closure to keep hikers away until the entities settled back into their normal patterns. Other experienced rangers would understand exactly what had happened and take appropriate measures. As the sky began to lighten with the first hint of dawn, emergency personnel prepared to transport Robert to the hospital. He'd been given IV fluids and was stable but still needed medical attention. The others would be taken to the station for additional questioning before being released. Emily approached me as I stood by my truck preparing to head back to the visitor center. "How do you do it?" she asked, her voice raw with exhaustion. "How do you keep working in a place like this?" I looked at her, wondering how much truth she could handle. I've thought about quitting many times, but you don't. I sighed, looking back toward the mountains now visible in the pre-dawn light. For every group like yours, there are 5 others that make it through safely because they follow the rules. Without experienced rangers maintaining those boundaries and guiding groups, the casualty rate would be much higher. "Those things out there," she began, then paused as if deciding whether to acknowledge what we both knew to be true. "They're not natural, are they?" "They've been here longer than we have," I said simply. Emily nodded slowly. "I wanted to thank you for getting us out. I know you couldn't save everyone, but—" Her voice trailed off. I understood. The guilt of survivors. "Tyler made his choice," I said gently. "So did Jessica when she tried to go after him." Emily's eyes widened. "You mean when the lights took him?" I nodded. "I've seen it before. Once they're drawn in that completely, they're gone." Sarah approached us, holding something in her hands. "I grabbed this during our escape," she said, extending Tyler's camera toward me. "I thought his family might want it back." I took the camera, knowing it likely contained images no family should see and evidence that needed to be destroyed before others reviewed it. "I'll make sure they get his personal effects." "Thank you." A paramedic called for Emily and Sarah to join the others in the ambulance. They gave me one last look before walking away, carrying an experience that would change them forever. Most survivors never returned to these mountains. Some never hiked again. A few became obsessed, researching folklore and coming back with new theories and equipment, usually with tragic results. As the emergency vehicles pulled away, I stood alone at the edge of the forest. My job wasn't done. More hikers would arrive this afternoon, a group of college students on a weekend trip. They would need the same warnings, the same rules. Some would listen, some wouldn't. I turned back toward the visitor center, a 5-mile walk that would give me time to prepare mentally for the day ahead. On the way, I stopped at Tyler's abandoned campsite. The morning light revealed what darkness had hidden. A family photo tucked into his tent pocket, a journal half filled with observations about nature, a bracelet woven by someone who loved him. I gathered these items carefully. Families always wanted something tangible to hold on to, even if they never learned the truth about what happened to their loved ones. Back at the ranger station, I updated my patrol log with the new supernatural activity patterns I'd observed. The coordination between entities was troubling and unprecedented. The false ranger represented an evolution in their hunting strategies. I noted all of this in carefully coded language that would alert other experienced rangers without alarming administrative personnel. Outside my window, the mountains rose against the morning sky, beautiful and deadly as they had been for centuries. I knew their dangers better than most, yet I remained. Not because I was brave or foolish, but because someone needed to stand between those ancient threats and the people who came here unaware. Someone needed to enforce the rules that kept most visitors safe, even knowing that some would inevitably ignore those rules and pay the ultimate price. I checked my watch. 4 hours until the next group arrived. Just enough time to shower, eat, and prepare to do it all again.